On a tranquil evening at Jetavana Monastery, birds sang melodiously in the lush green trees. The Buddha sat in meditation under the Bodhi tree, a gentle aura radiating around him. As he opened his eyes, his compassionate gaze spread everywhere. A king knelt before him, his face etched with worry and reverence. The Buddha smiled kindly, then began to tell an ancient story, his voice resonating like temple bells. This tale would offer a valuable lesson for the young king, helping him better understand how to rule the country fairly and compassionately. The full context of this scene will be presented in detail in the Tesakuna Jataka, another meaningful story from the Buddha's treasury of wisdom. In ancient times, the city of Benares shone like a precious jewel in the heart of the country. Tall towers, curved roofs, and sturdy walls painted a magnificent picture under the brilliant sunlight. At the center of this kingdom stood King Brahmadatta's palace, a symbol of power and wealth. King Brahmadatta, a man of majestic appearance, sat upon his splendid golden throne. His jewel-encrusted crown glittered atop his jet-black hair, while his sharp eyes seemed to follow every movement of his courtiers. Beside the king stood a virtuous Bodhisattva, his eyes deep in thought. He wore a dignified yellow robe, his hair and beard as white as snow, creating a stark contrast to the palace's splendor. However, behind the city and palace's magnificent facade, a dark reality silently spread. Cries of the people echoed through dim alleys where rickety houses crowded together. King Brahmadatta, though born into a noble royal family, had strayed down an evil path, allowing greed and cruelty to dominate his mind. Daily, the king issued harsh decrees, extorting wealth from the poor. The sound of hammers rang out from the new palace's construction site, but it also echoed the chains binding the people. While the palace grew more splendid with gold and jewels, outside, the people suffered from hunger and disease. The Bodhisattva, with his compassionate heart and profound wisdom, painfully witnessed this scene. Whenever he stepped outside the palace, his eyes, usually bright with wisdom, darkened at the sight of the people's suffering. He saw emaciated children, frail elderly, and eyes filled with despair. In his heart, he resolved to find a way to awaken the king and guide him back to the righteous path. But how could he touch the heart of a tyrant without endangering himself? The Bodhisattva pondered deeply, pacing back and forth in his private chamber. Flickering candlelight cast ghostly shadows on the walls, as if dancing to the rhythm of his thoughts. He knew that a single misspoken word could lead to death, but silence would condemn the entire kingdom to darkness. Meanwhile, the palace interior underwent renovation. The sound of hammering echoed everywhere, blending with the workers' cheers. The smell of fresh wood and lime mortar filled the air, creating a bustling atmosphere. The roof stood incomplete, with rafters supporting the pointed top recently placed, creating an impressive half-finished scene. Sunlight streamed through the gaps, painting magical streaks of light on the floor. One afternoon, after strolling through the beautiful royal garden, King Brahmadatta returned to the palace. The fragrance of flowers still clung to his robe, creating a strange contrast with the stifling palace atmosphere. As he entered, the king's eyes suddenly looked up. He saw the circular roof under construction, its rafters reaching high as if trying to touch the deep blue sky. Anxiety suddenly gripped the king's heart. His eyes widened, his brows furrowed, creating deep wrinkles on his forehead. He wondered, could the roof collapse? The thought of this grand structure falling made his heart race, beads of sweat forming on his brow. With a worried expression, King Brahmadatta stepped outside, gazing up at the unfinished structure. The evening breeze gently blew, making his robe flutter. In his mind, questions arose like gathering storm clouds. How can this roof stand so firmly? How do those rafters work? Are they strong enough to support this entire structure? The king's eyes brimmed with curiosity and concern, as if he faced one of the universe's great mysteries. King Brahmadatta stood in awe before the unfinished structure, his eyes brimming with curiosity and wonder. He gazed up at the circular roof, where rafters stretched skyward as if reaching for the deep blue heavens. The evening sun cast its rays upon the wooden beams, creating a mesmerizing interplay of light and shadow, a vivid tableau of fragility and strength. Questions about this marvelous structure and its delicate balance swirled in his mind. Suddenly, as if moved by an unseen force, the king began to chant. His deep, warm voice, tinged with fascination and uncertainty, echoed in the twilight air. His song flowed like a stream of consciousness, part inquiry, part homage to architectural marvels. In King Brahmadatta's opulent palace, the evening light streamed through tall windows, painting long golden stripes across the marble floor. The day's final rays bathed everything in a brilliant metallic sheen. From the nearby construction site came a symphony of labor and creativity, the rhythmic sounds of hammering intermingled with workers' calls. The king, resplendent in his gold-embroidered robe, stood before the unfinished roof. His eyes traced every line of the structure, from soaring rafters to intricate pillar details. A gentle breeze stirred his robe, creating an image at once majestic and human. In that moment, the boundaries between man and edifice, power and vulnerability, seemed to blur. As evening light descended upon the construction site, it painted a magical, colorful scene. King Brahmadatta's eyes shone with curiosity and delight as he beheld the towering circular roof. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the wooden rafters, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow on the ground. Birdsong from the nearby garden blended with the rhythmic sounds of construction, creating a harmonious melody of nature and human industry. The king sensed the structure's solidity, yet an inexplicable curiosity stirred in his heart. He circled the roof slowly, his gaze following every line and detail. His hand gently caressed the simsa and sara wooden beams, as if trying to feel their hidden strength. Questions filled his mind. How could a roof 1.5 cubits high stand so firmly? Did the secret lie in the 8 large rafters embracing its entire circumference? Once again, inspired by the structure's beauty and wonder, the king began to chant. His deep, warm voice, rich with fascination and uncertainty, resonated in the twilight air. His song flowed like a stream of thoughts, blending inquiry and admiration for architectural wonders. The Bodhisattva stood beside him, his pale golden robe fluttering in the gentle evening breeze. His eyes, bright with wisdom, sparkled as if he'd glimpsed a precious opportunity. He listened intently to each word of the king's song while carefully observing his expressions. The Bodhisattva thought, "This is the moment I've been waiting for to advise the king." A slight smile played on his lips, as if anticipating an important lesson to come. The Bodhisattva stepped forward gently, his gaze fixed on the unfinished roof. The sala wood rafters reached skyward, creating an impressive silhouette against the twilight. His eyes gleamed with wisdom, as if he'd just grasped a brilliant idea to answer the king's questions. With a deep, persuasive voice, he began describing the roof's marvelous structure, skillfully drawing parallels to a kingdom built on wisdom and loyalty. The Bodhisattva explained how 30 small sala wood rafters were arranged with skill and delicacy around the roof's lower end. They pressed close together, forming a sturdy circle, like-minded friends joining hands. This harmonious combination allowed the roof to stand tall and unwavering, despite its great height. The Bodhisattva's voice rose and fell like a soothing melody, captivating the king, who couldn't take his eyes off the sage. The Bodhisattva paused, allowing his words to sink into King Brahmadatta's heart. His gaze, gentle yet penetrating, observed the king's attentive face. The furrows on the king's brow gradually smoothed, his eyes brightening with dawning understanding. The Bodhisattva smiled, recognizing the seeds of wisdom taking root in the young ruler's soul. He continued, his voice deepening, carrying wisdom and compassion like a cool stream into the king's parched spirit. The Bodhisattva deftly likened a wise person to the sturdy roof. Just as rafters support the roof, he explained, a wise king is buttressed by virtuous advisors and loyal friends. Their support and honest counsel help the king stand firm against all challenges, unwavering in the face of adversity. A gentle breeze wafted by, bearing the sweet scent of lotus from a nearby pond, as if to underscore this precious lesson. The king's gaze grew thoughtful, pondering the profound meaning in the Bodhisattva's words. Each phrase touched the deepest recesses of King Brahmadatta's soul, awakening new insights about a ruler's responsibilities and purpose. As the Bodhisattva finished speaking, a magical silence descended. Another soft breeze carried the lotus fragrance, rustling the thin silk curtains. It seemed as if nature itself listened, appreciating the sage's profound teaching. The day's last golden rays bathed the scene, creating a solemn backdrop for this momentous lesson. King Brahmadatta stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His eyes seemed lost in reflection, the verses he'd heard slowly permeating his heart. His face bore a pensive expression, brows slightly furrowed as he grappled with the hidden depths of the Bodhisattva's wisdom. In that moment, the entire palace seemed frozen in time. Evening sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting long streaks across the marble floor, a tableau of stillness and contemplation. Echoes of wisdom and compassion seeped into the young king's soul, like life-giving streams trickling through parched earth. The Bodhisattva stood nearby, his eyes gentle yet gleaming with insight, noting every nuance of the king's thoughtful countenance. Hope blossomed in his heart that his teachings had touched the young ruler, sowing seeds of positive change. The persistent breeze stirred the king's robes, its golden threads glinting in the fading light, an image both regal and profoundly human. It seemed nature itself urged deeper reflection on the Bodhisattva's lesson about a ruler's duty to his people and realm. King Brahmadatta's gaze drifted to the unfinished roof. Its rafters reached skyward, stark against the surrounding palace's perfection. In the king's mind, this image took on new significance, a metaphor for his own journey in governing and nation-building. Closing his eyes, the king breathed deeply. In his mind, a solemn voice resonated like a temple bell in the night. Without a roof, the rafters would fall aimlessly, like warriors who've lost their commander. Opening his eyes, he surveyed the magnificent palace, his gaze resting on its sturdy pillars. The roof, too, cannot stand without the rafters' support. If one rafter breaks, the entire structure might collapse. The corridor's gentle breeze seemed to whisper agreement. King Brahmadatta inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of precious wood and orchids. Eyes closed, he envisioned his kingdom, a vivid tapestry stretching from mountains to plains. Similarly, he mused, his inner voice growing grave, a tyrannical, evil king cannot retain friends, ministers, army, Brahmins, or householders. They will forsake me like birds abandoning a decaying nest. A chill ran down his spine, and if these pillars crumble, the king becomes like a roof without support, collapsing, stripped of all power. A cold realization spread through his chest, as if the entire palace had suddenly grown chill and desolate. Suddenly, a voice soft as a bamboo flute broke his reverie. "Your Majesty," a young handmaiden in a jade-green silk robe bowed, her eyes sparkling. "We humbly offer a pomelo freshly picked from the royal garden." She presented an intricately carved silver plate bearing a pomelo as large as 2 hands, its skin green and smooth as jade, its fragrance perfuming the air. King Brahmadatta smiled, the worried lines on his brow easing. He turned to the Bodhisattva, his eyes alight with childlike enthusiasm. "My friend, please enjoy this pomelo." The Bodhisattva accepted the pomelo, cradling it gently as if holding a treasure. He felt its weight, as though weighing the responsibilities of a king. The subtle fragrance wafted through the air, reminiscent of virtue and wisdom. With a voice as calm as a cool stream, yet as deep as the ocean, he said, "Your Majesty, enjoying a pomelo is much like the art of governing." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. One who doesn't know how will taste only bitterness or spiciness, ruining the experience, just as a king who misunderstands his people will reap hatred and discontent. The Bodhisattva caressed the pomelo's skin, as if touching the soul of a nation. But one with wisdom will remove the bitter peel, keeping a hint of tartness to enhance the sweet flavor inside, without losing the fruit's essence. Similarly, a wise ruler will eliminate negative elements, balance strictness and kindness, and make wise decisions, nurturing prosperity and happiness for all. The Bodhisattva's eyes, deep and penetrating, looked straight into the young king's heart. With a voice as warm as distant temple bells, he explained the art of governing and creating true wealth for the country. "Your Majesty," he began, "consider this pomelo a symbol of ruling. The thick, bitter skin represents the challenges a king faces. But inside lies the sweet, essential pulp, the prosperity and happiness of the people." He peeled the pomelo with the grace of a master artisan. "A wise king removes negative elements, just as I peel away this bitter skin. Yet he retains a touch of tartness to highlight the sweetness within, much like balancing strictness and kindness in governing." King Brahmadatta listened intently, his eyes brightening with dawning understanding. The Bodhisattva continued, his voice deepening. "A wise king never rules through violence or oppression. Instead, he collects taxes fairly, like rain showering evenly across a field. Thus, the nation's wealth grows righteously, like trees blossoming after rain. The king's reputation then spreads far and wide, his virtue shining like the midday sun. King Brahmadatta nodded, his eyes filled with comprehension. They walked together to a nearby lotus pond, a gentle breeze carrying the fragrance of flowers as if whispering nature's secrets. At the shore, a breathtaking sight unfolded. In the crystal-clear water, a lotus bloomed fully, its pink petals radiant as dawn, reaching straight up to the azure sky. King Brahmadatta paused, awestruck by the flower's pure beauty. "My friend," the king said, his voice filled with emotion, "that lotus grows straight up, unsullied by the water. How marvelous!" The Bodhisattva smiled, his eyes brimming with ageless wisdom. "Your Majesty," he replied, his voice soothing as a bamboo flute in the wind. "A king must be the same, rising above the world, not letting power's temptations and pollution tarnish his noble soul." Gazing at the pure lotus, the Bodhisattva's eyes reflected profound wisdom. With a voice resonant as distant temple bells, he recited verses that flowed like a cool stream into King Brahmadatta's soul. "Behold that lotus, Your Majesty. It rises from the jade-like lake surface, its white roots nourished by pure water. Under brilliant sunlight, its petals unfurl in delicate pink hues, untouched by dust or mud, preserving pristine beauty. Similarly, a person of noble virtue shines on the path of righteousness. Their soul is gentle, kind, radiant as the full moon. Like the pure lotus in the pond, they live in the world without letting desire and greed's mud stain their lofty spirit." The Bodhisattva's teaching was like a cool breeze blowing into King Brahmadatta's soul. The king's eyes shone with deep understanding, as if grasping a profound truth about life. From that moment, he resolved to rule with righteousness and compassion. Day by day, he practiced good deeds, giving alms to the poor, building schools and hospitals. The king's compassion spread throughout the country like warm morning sunlight illuminating every corner. Thanks to his accumulated merits, when his earthly life ended, the king's soul was reborn in the heavenly realm, a place of eternal peace and happiness. As the story concluded, the Buddha, with compassionate eyes and a gentle smile, looked down at the attentive audience. He proclaimed the noble truths, his teachings like rays of wisdom illuminating each person's soul. Then, with a voice as resonant as temple bells, he identified the birth. "Know, my children, that in those distant times, King Brahmadatta was Ananda, my closest disciple now, and the wise royal advisor who used the lotus metaphor to teach the king was none other than myself in a previous life." The story of King Brahmadatta and the Bodhisattva royal advisor contains many profound Buddhist teachings. Here are some of the main lessons. 1. Impermanence and karma. The story demonstrates the change in the king's character, from a tyrannical ruler to one who listens and reflects. This illustrates the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, that everything can change, including human nature. At the same time, it also shows the law of karma. The Bodhisattva's wise actions lead to positive changes in the king. 2. Wisdom and skillful means. The Bodhisattva uses wisdom and skillful means to convey moral lessons to the king. Instead of direct criticism, he skillfully uses the metaphor of the roof to help the king realize the lesson on his own. This is the method that the Buddha often used to teach, adapting to each person's capacity. 3. Greed, hatred, delusion, and their consequences. The story reflects the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion through the king's behavior. His greed and tyranny led to suffering for the people. The lesson here is about how these afflictions can cloud our judgment, causing us to inflict suffering on ourselves and others. 4. Compassion and wisdom. The Bodhisattva demonstrates a perfect combination of compassion and wisdom. He empathizes with the suffering of the people and wishes to help them, while using wisdom to find the most appropriate approach to change the king. Number 5. Dependent origination. The story illustrates the teaching of dependent origination, that everything is interconnected and influences each other. The interaction between the king, the bodhisattva, and the surrounding circumstances, such as the construction of the roof, creates an opportunity for moral lessons to be conveyed. 6. Diligence and practice. The bodhisattva shows perseverance and diligence in finding ways to help the king and the people. This reminds us of the importance of persistent practice and continuous effort on the path of enlightenment. 7. Non-self and responsibility. The lesson about the roof and its rafters illustrates the teaching of non-self. Nothing exists independently without the support of other factors. At the same time, it also emphasizes the responsibility of a leader towards those around them. 8. Enlightenment and liberation. The process of the king gradually realizing the truth and changing his character can be seen as a form of minor enlightenment. This suggests that enlightenment can come from moments of awakening in daily life. Advice: apply these lessons to your daily life. Remember that every action and word can create positive change. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more valuable Buddhist teachings. We look forward to hearing your thoughts. Please share your reflections and experiences in the comments section below the video.